Good morning. Okay, so got a couple things rolling around in my head. I was writing this morning about symbols, and symbols, as we've discussed, are the union between the rational and the irrational. So, irrational doesn't mean nonsense or logical contradiction. Irrational is simply pointing to things that are beyond reason. So a common argument on God is that God is all powerful, then he can do all things. And then what is instantly said right after that is that all things doesn't mean all things. All things just means all things that make sense. And the way that that's discussed is if it's an intrinsic impossibility is something that is self-defeating. So for instance, a square triangle or a married bachelor, that doesn't make any sense. The second that a bachelor becomes married, he stops being a bachelor because he's married. The second a square becomes a triangle, it stops being a square because it's a triangle. So it's two separate things that if they were to become one would be nonsensical. Well, since it's nonsensical, the scholars consider it to be something that doesn't exist. It's a logical contradiction. It's intrinsically impossible. It defeats itself. And so it's not a thing. And so when they say God is all powerful, what they're trying to state is that God can do all things. And since an intrinsic impossibility is not a thing, then it doesn't count that. That doesn't count because it's not a thing, it's nothing. It doesn't exist. And I push back against this because of a couple main reasons. The first one being, if there's laws of nature, then there's assumed to be a lawgiver, right? That's a common apologetics thing to say. People like Frank Turek, William Lane Craig, Ravi Zacharias, they'll say that. If there's a lawgiver, or if there's laws of nature, there's a lawgiver. And that just makes sense. And I think it's a great argument. Well, there's laws of logic. So that assumes that there's a lawgiver. And if God is bound by logic or bound by reason, meaning he can't go outside of it, then that means, first of all, he's limited in the sense that he can't do something. And secondly, whoever is making the laws of logic is now the new lawgiver, which means that there is something bounding God. Like whatever made the laws of logic is now bounding God, which wouldn't that then be the new God, per se? And then on top of that, you look at the being of the Trinity. So the being of the Trinity is three separate beings, but also one. It's not like a circle that you cut into three different pieces. It's one circle that is also three separate circles, but is also one circle. So that's the same thing as a square triangle or a married bachelor. It's an intrinsic impossibility. And I'm not saying that that's false. I'm saying that it's beyond reason. It's not a joke or a mistake that God's very being is outside of the bounds of logic. It's because he created logic. We say that with space, time, and material. It's like God is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. He can't be found inside of that unless he wants to be. And it's because his very nature is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. So why would we look for his essence inside of space, time, material? It doesn't make any sense because the creator is not the created, right? You look for the creator outside of the created thing. Just like you look for the artist outside of the painting. You can look at the painting, but it doesn't make sense that the artist would be in the painting. It's his fingerprints on the painting, but that's not him, right? Same thing with the laws of logic. There's a lawgiver, and I believe that that's God himself, and God can do all things. So the old question of, can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it? And the answer would be yes. We wouldn't understand it because it's a mystery, just like his very being. God can do whatever he wants. All things means all things that are real and all possible things that could ever be real, which is infinite. And so when we're talking of God, we're talking of two things. One is very commonly associated with, which is reason, concept, the word, the logos, the graspable, the controllable, the understood, the concrete, the frame, the order. And the other is the opposite. It's the spirit, it's the nature, it's the chaos, it's the fluidity, it's the wave, it's the Tao representing the part of God that is limitless, it's immeasurable, it's eternal. And so when you're thinking like a philosopher, you don't like stuff like that because your whole thing is grasping concepts that are ungraspable. And honestly, it makes you feel better when you can understand something, because if you can understand it, then it's kind of in your control. So there's two sides to God. Well, the symbol is where those two meet, right? The symbol is where the irrational, as in beyond reason, and the rational meet. So I'm writing about this and I'm thinking, okay, everything is a symbol, because everything is a union between what we can understand and what we don't. Everything is a union between the physical world and the spiritual world. You know, if you think about words are symbols, because when I say the word love, it points towards the reality of love. But the reality of love is not inside of the word. The word is a symbolic representation of the idea of love, or the reality of love. And so it's a symbol. It's the union between what I can understand and see and grasp, the frame of the word, and what is beyond reasonable grasp, which is love. How many books have been written about love, and do you think we've covered it? No, it's because it's an infinite, eternal thing. It lives with God beyond reason. So, a word is a symbol. Then you think of something like your actions. You know, there's a quote that says, "Preach always, use words when necessary," and it's because actions speak louder than words. And that's literally just saying, be the kind of person that you preach about, right? And it's because actions communicate. Well, actions are the physical representation of a belief. It's a belief acted out. So if you're taking something abstract like a belief and you're having it manifest in a physical way, aka through discipline and action, then your life becomes a symbol, because you're symbolically representing what you believe. So discipline is ultimate self-expression. It's the bridge, the concreteness, or the order that people can understand each other on. And the abstraction is the belief, the values that you identify with, who you believe in, Jesus, Gandhi, whatever. I don't know why I went straight to Gandhi. That's kind of funny. And that's ultimately what religion is, right? It's the contract. It's the contract that people agreed to follow, that binds people together in unity. It's supposed to reduce confusion. So again, we'll use words as an example because contracts are filled with words. If you look at a word, let's say I have an idea in my head and I'm trying to communicate it to you. I have to take all the chaos and abstract ideas inside of my mind and formulate them into something concrete called a sentence. and then I have to speak the sentence to you. Well, since you understand English words, you're going to be able to receive the package, because I have taken my abstract concept, put it in the package or the frame of the sentence, and I've handed it to you, and then you take the package and you unpack it, and it goes back into your head as understanding. So it's gone from my spirit through a transaction of concreteness, a frame, something we can both understand, into your spirit, and that's how we communicate. And so that's what a religious contract is supposed to do. You know, it's the covenant, the Mosaic law. When we're discussing right and wrong, the whole point is not to just be a better person. That's not what God cares about. The whole point is to find unity in relationship, right? And so that's the same thing as saying there's the contract that binds us all together so we have less confusion and more answers on what we should be doing and what we all believe and agree upon. And then there's the spirit behind the contract. And so when Jesus was, flipping tables and doing stuff on the Sabbath, he was pointing out that you guys have traded the contract for the spirit of the contract. Like, you've given up the intention of love for the sake of following rules. And so what he did was he flipped those rules on their heads, because it's like, what's the point of the rules? What's whatever the rules point at? And so Jesus was pointing at the point of the rules, and the Pharisees were just pointing at the rules themselves. And so you'll see lawyers do this a lot. Lawyers will look at the characters on a technical level, and they'll make them say and do whatever they want to make their case. It's easy to do. I mean, if you can take anything and make it say anything, if you really try. But if you look at the intention of the passage, then suddenly the characters don't matter as much as the overall intention of the text, right? You can say it a bazillion different ways, but since you understand the intention, the core concept is the same. So it's less about the words and more about what the words represent, which is the same thing as saying that the concreteness of life, the reason or the measurable side of life, is important only insofar as it points to beyond reason. And so that's what symbols do, right? Symbols represent. And we don't look at symbols as the thing. We look through symbols towards the thing. And so when let's say a couple gets married and they get married, they make vows before God, right? And then a preacher or pastor who's ordained binds them in marriage, right? What that couple has just represented is they have their abstractness separately. The marriage contract and the vows, the covenant, are the bridge on which they have committed to each other on mutual understanding. The fact that they did it under a pastor means that they're doing it under Christ. And so what they're saying is, I'm never going to give up on you, and I'm going to love you like Christ loves me, and I will ask for his help when it gets hard. And that orients you, that binds you towards a specific direction, specifically towards Jesus, and it gives you the contract that is that brings the highest amount of unity. But it's not because of right and wrong. You don't look at your wife and say, is this right or wrong? You look at her from a relational viewpoint. You want to love her. You want to serve her and do what's well for her. You don't think, man, I'm not going to cheat today. Like, it just doesn't pop up. You don't want to. You don't want to cheat because you love her. And so that's exactly what it is when it comes to religion. You have the contract, you have the Mosaic law, And it does talk about right and wrong, but the point is not so that you can be a better person. The point is so that you can be in relationship with others with less friction, right? When you tell the truth, you're not going to be called a liar and distrusted. When you tell the truth all the time, people are going to trust what you say. And that's going to make it a lot easier to be in relationship with people because people will take you at your word. If your yes is your yes and your no is your no, when you say that you're going to do something, you're going to do it. And then people can trust and not second guess you. When you don't murder people, obviously people are gonna not be scared of you, and you're not gonna be in prison, because those things are gonna be hard to keep relationships if you're killing people. Not to covet. What's another one? Love your God before all else. Honor your mother and father. All these things are relational cues. They have nothing to. They tell you what's right and wrong, but the whole intention is to reduce friction in relationship and bring unity towards a specific direction. The direction being Jesus and heaven. So, the symbol. The symbol is the union between the rational and the irrational. And the point is to use what we can see, feel, touch, and communicate on as a bridge to the beyond reason. And the beyond reason is where relationship lies. It's where love lies. It's where patience and kindness lies. It's where trust lies. It's where intention lies. These things are beyond reason. We can try to conceptualize them. We can try to analyze them. We can try to talk about them. And it's going to be a limitation. You're putting boundaries on things that they have no boundaries. And it's helpful for us because we're humans and we're finite. But when we talk of infinite things, you can only go so far with a contract. You don't want to mix the contract with the relationship. And you don't want to miss the music for the sheet music. You don't want to miss the movie for the script. You don't want to mistake the war for the history book. And so, why would we do that with God? And why would we do that with our wives? Get stuck in a business transactional relationship, a utilitarian utopia, where the only people that are around you are the ones that serve whatever your goal is to the highest potential. And nothing is relational because relation is messy. It doesn't make sense on an investment level. It's not practical. It would be much easier if people just listen and do what they're told inside of the hierarchy. And if you act up, you're gone because I got places that I gotta go. I gotta meet my potential. I gotta meet my self-growth. It's like, that's fine, but at the end of the day, people are messy and they don't act like machines. And so if you start getting rid of people because they don't act right, you're going to be left with lifeless, spiritless bootlickers that act like a machine. And now we're getting robots, so you're probably going to fire them too and replace them with machines because machines don't sleep and they don't tell you no and they don't make mistakes. And you'll probably make a lot of money and a lot of progress, but then you'll be alone and you'll be wondering what the heck happened. I got everything I wanted. I became my potential self, but now you're alone and you've sacrificed everything for the sake of your own future. And when you arrive there, you're there, but what the heck is that, man? So what's your life symbolizing at that point? Okay, my walk's ending, so I gotta chill out here, but beyond reason is relationship, beyond reason is love, beyond reason is patience and kindness and trust and intention and all that. And it's symbolized through your character. You are irrational, as in beyond reason, speaking rationally through discipline, action, words. So I guess the question is, what do you represent? What's the story your life is telling symbolically?